As the first vaccines for COVID-19 get closer to market, this week Canada found itself asking some tough questions. When will they land on our shores? Who will get them first? And why aren't we making them here in the first place? The answers aren't simple, and to help us through them, we're joined from Ontario's capital city by the waterfront, Steven Hoffman, Director of the Global Strategy Lab and Professor of Global Health, Law and Political Science at York University. And in Riverdale, close to me, Kelly Grant, National Health Reporter for the Global Mail. Hi, so nice to see you both.
Thanks for having us.
So before we get into the discussion, I want to roll a clip of the Prime Minister. Sheldon, could you please roll?
I know people are really eager to find out, when are we going to get to that starting line? When are we going to start giving people vaccines? And we're working as hard as we can to make that as quickly as possible. But at the same time, what really matters is when we get to cross the finish line. And the fact that the doctors highlighted that if all goes according to plan, we should be able to have the majority of Canadians vaccinated by next September puts us in very good stead.
Steven, and both Kelly, it's been a really difficult time for everyone. And I think when people heard September, it wasn't what they wanted to hear. Why a September timeline, Steven?
Well, I think we all want to be vaccinated for COVID-19 as fast as possible because we all want to get through this extraordinary time in our lives. The reality, though, is it takes time first to develop a vaccine. And now that we have a vaccine that's about to be approved, it takes time to manufacture enough doses for the world to be able to all have it and benefit from its effectiveness. And so, yes, we have heard that it might be as early as this month that vaccines are starting to be used in the human population, which is great. But it takes time to manufacture enough doses and roll it out across our country.
And also, I guess, to see if the vaccine is safe as well, right?
That's right. I think one thing that's really important when it comes to vaccines or any medical product is that we don't want to rush the approval. We don't want to be cutting corners. And the good news is in Canada, we have one of the very best health products regulators, that's Health Canada, and they're not cutting corners. And the reason why that's so important is because when every Canadian gets a vaccine, they need to have the confidence that it's effective and it's safe. And that's what's going to happen once we get that seal of approval from Health Canada.
September is, in the past, we've been hearing how long it takes to get a vaccine. And this vaccine came faster than a lot of people. In the past, it's taken somewhere between 4 to 5 years. Kelly, how did we get here so quickly?
Well, I think a big part of it was just that there was a ton of money on the table, a huge global effort. And so as a result, things moved in a way that they just haven't in the past. I think as well, when it came to actually testing the vaccine during these very large phase 3 clinical trials, there's just so much of this this virus circulating right now that getting to the initial endpoints of this trial happened much faster than you would expect because just a lot of people got sick in the placebo groups very quickly, and they were able to come to conclusions about how well, particularly these first 2 mRNA vaccines, seem to work.
And Steven, we're going to talk a little later on in the show about why Canada is not in a position to produce these vaccines domestically. Is it right when people, you hear the criticism towards the Prime Minister saying that the government didn't act fast enough. Is it fair? Is that criticism fair?
Well, so as a lawyer and an epidemiologist, I think what's really important to note is that we are as prepared for a pandemic as we allow ourselves to be before the pandemic starts. In a sense, what that means is to prepare effectively for anything like this, it's years that's in the making of investments in our public health infrastructure, but also choices that have been made to not invest in that public health infrastructure. I mean, it was just weeks before this pandemic started that several provinces actually cut public health budgets. And so then when Canadians might be frustrated with the lack of a response to a pandemic, partially it's based on the lack of investments that was made in public health leading up to the pandemic. When it comes to vaccine production, though, we live in a globally connected world. And over the last few decades, there's been a globalization of the medical supply chain. And part of that is because Canadians and taxpayers all ask their government to be procuring products as cheaply as possible, which has left a lack of capacity within Canada to be making some things. Now, we can in Canada produce some vaccines, but we don't have the capacity to produce the newest mRNA vaccines, for which the two leading COVID-19 vaccines are.
How is that different from the vaccines from the past?
Well, there's various different ways of making vaccines. One is, for example, making a vaccine out of a weakened version of the virus. Another is to insert a genetic sequence into another kind of virus, like an adenovirus, which is what the AstraZeneca Oxford virus has done. That would allow, it would prompt a response from the human immunology that would protect people from this virus. More recently, they've used an mRNA platform, which instead of giving a virus, it's actually just giving the genetic code that would directly prompt that human immunological response, providing that protective effect. So there are different ways of producing viruses. They then require different kind of production capacity. And that, I think, is what's clear here. In the rollout for this vaccine, it's manufacturing that's going to be the rate limiting step.
And Kelly, you've been covering this story since it began. And a lot of the way that we've been able to control this is personal behavior, wearing the masks, staying home, physical distance, working from home. 9 months, what the Prime Minister said, to have the whole country vaccinated. That's a long time. September is a very long time away. We're talking about COVID fatigue. How do we get to the finish line?
Well, I think one of the first things is that I feel like we shouldn't be talking so much about the finish line. I think the starting line really is important. I mean, this virus is very hard on the old, it's very hard on the medically vulnerable, and it's been very hard on the healthcare system because there are so many people at the front lines who've either gotten sick or who are having to go into isolation because they have been exposed to the virus. So we're looking at, in Canada, having 6 million doses of these first two vaccines in the country in the first quarter of 2021. That's enough to vaccinate 3 million people because these first ones are all 2-dose vaccines. So I think that if we are able to vaccinate people in long-term care, workers in long-term care, frontline healthcare workers, and a decent chunk of the population over the age of 80, the difference that will make in terms of severe illness, the difference that will make in terms of death is really profound. And this is not to say that it doesn't matter that, people like me and you who are younger and healthier shouldn't take the vaccine. We all need it. I can't wait for September to come. I am excited. I will be first in line when my term comes. But in the meantime, let's not underplay how important this sort of first wave of vaccines could be to bringing down the death count in Canada.
Do you worry, though, that, we do hear, I think it's just human behavior, or when you do hear that there is a vaccine available, it's kind of like, oh, phew, we're almost out of this, hell that we've all been living. Do you worry that that's going to start to affect personal behavior, people being a bit more relaxed in how they should be protecting themselves?
I do worry about it. I really feel like the message has to be, hang on, stick with these basic public health measures. Wear your mask. Don't spend time with people indoors who you don't live with. These measures are really important right now, and they will be for several more months. But I also feel like there's a big difference in feeling as though you are being asked to do this indefinitely until the end of time and being told that if you hang on for a few more months, you can save a lot of lives, and there is a light at the end of this tunnel, and we will get our lives back. So let's hang on until then. And I think public health officials have to work really hard to get that message across.
Stephen, I see you nodding.
I agree 100% with Kelly. I think that we do need to be focused on effective public health messaging at this time. We have seen during this pandemic, not always has that public health messaging been as clear as what we need. And I think the messaging is exactly as Kelly just said. We need people to hang on, hang in there, keep on doing these measures. They're saving lives, they're protecting families, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel and reason for all of us to be optimistic as we go through what will likely be a very difficult winter.
Stephen, last night the news broke that Pfizer will have to have its production from 100 million doses due to a shortage of raw materials. What does that do to timelines?
Well, the shortages that they're affecting their production were things that were affecting over the last few weeks. So in that respect, it's new news for the public. It's not new news for those who are deeply involved in vaccine production and procurement. So it is unlikely to affect the timelines that have been discussed within the last couple of weeks. That being said, it does highlight the inherent risks involved in the medical supply chain in terms of seeing potential future delays. I think that's why we're seeing such hesitation from our political leaders and public health leaders to give any definitive dates, because a vaccine is complicated. Deploying it is complicated. There's many steps along the way that could result in delays. And as a result, in a time when Canadians want certainty, but more so, I think Canadians want truth, and they want clear knowledge from their leaders about what their leaders know. And so that's this example of delay in a manufacturing process that, for no one's fault, highlights why we need to be open to when this is happening, but also feel confident that we're going to be soon have those access to vaccines, and that's a good thing.
Well, you mentioned truth, and this didn't seem like breaking news to either one of you. Is this something that the public should have known sooner, Kelly?
I found that story quite bizarre, to be honest with you. Pfizer had been talking about trying to get to a goal of 100 million doses by the end of 2021. The last time I believe they spoke about that number publicly was late summer. They put the 50 million number, this new revised lower number, in a press release on November 9th. Now, mind you, of course, that was the same day they announced their interim results from their trial. And so that number, I think, got perhaps lost to the public. But there were several news stories that talked about this pending production cut. And I think the important thing for everybody here in Canada is that the numbers the government has been speaking about publicly for the last few weeks have already taken that lower than expected production capacity into account. So I think everyone freaked out a little bit about that piece of news, but I don't think it should have a material impact on the number of doses we're able to receive here in Canada. We've been working with those numbers for a few weeks now.
Well, Steven, we've been hearing that the Canadian government has several contracts with different manufacturing companies for the vaccines. How do these contracts work?
Well, those contracts were mostly signed in the summer before the vaccines were finished their trials, before we knew whether they're effective. Essentially, the government was trying to cover all of its bases. I mean, we don't know which, or we didn't know until more recently, which vaccine was going to come to market first. And so it made sense for government to be pre-purchasing as many vaccines from different manufacturers and companies as possible to ensure that Canadians were at the front of the line along with other rich countries. And so that's what's done. I mean, the reality is that the health, social, and economic consequences of this pandemic are so big that there's no amount of candidates for vaccines that we could purchase that would be overdone. The hope, though, is that we have purchased over 350 million doses, well more than what the Canadian population will need. The hope is that any extra that's been purchased would be put to good use by donating it to low-income countries, which frankly, up until now, have been totally left out of this vaccine race, which is really unfair.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Kelly, why have we ordered so many vaccines when we have a country that's a tenth of the population of that?
Well, as I understand it, the Canadian government's thinking was that they just had to place a wide array of bets because they didn't know which one would come through. So it's fortunate that two of the bets we placed on Pfizer and Moderna, that those companies have come out with pretty solid results. We've also placed bets on the J&J vaccine, the Novavax vaccine, the AstraZeneca vaccine, which has had a bit of a hiccup, but is further along than some of the other ones I mentioned. So I think the thinking was never that we would need 350 million doses. It was just making a bet that not all of these vaccines would prove to be safe and effective. And none of them still at this point have Health Canada approval. So we'll see how the rest of things go with the remaining vaccines. But it was just basically placing a large number of bets.
I know you've both seen the news of people saying that, because we're now seeing that the UK has approved Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine. And there's a sentiment that Canada is going to be at the end of the line. Steven, assuming that we're all looking at the same data, why has the UK approved the vaccine before the US or Canada?
Well, just to clarify, Canada's definitely not at the end of the line. I mean, we placed those bets, as Kelly referred to them as, and those orders in the summer, which means that Canada will be close to the front of the line, along with several other rich countries that were able to pre-purchase those vaccines. In terms of the regulatory approval process, we in Canada have one of the most thorough, comprehensive, and careful health product regulators in the world. Health Canada is famous for ensuring that any product they approve will be safe for Canadians. And so different regulators will be going through and have slightly different processes. But the key is that we are already seeing that the Health Canada review is moving along at a similar pace to international counterparts, and everyone expects that that review will be finished this month. And in any event, whether Health Canada approved it today, next week, or even at the end of this month, that's not what's going to be the rate limiting step. Ultimately, what will be slowing down the full-scale use of vaccines in Canada is going to be just getting our hands on enough supply. And the challenge with that is that 7 billion people want it at the same time.
Well, the UK, they will start immunizing their citizens in a couple of weeks. We're nowhere near those timelines. Kelly, do you think people are getting anxious? Do you think that the UK was too quick to approve it, or were we too slow?
I don't necessarily think either, actually. I mean, I haven't been able to personally look at their submissions, so I'm sort of reluctant to judge. I'm reluctant to judge the UK's decision to move as quickly as they did. That being said, I think, I feel like for the last sort of week or two, basically ever since the Prime Minister got up and said, we are not going to be at the front of the line because of this issue of domestic production, that we've sort of all been in a tizzy focusing on this question of when and how we're going to get vaccines. The thing I'm actually much more interested and concerned about is, are we ready to receive these vaccines? Several of the provinces haven't rolled out any kind of vaccine plan. I was speaking, a fair bit this week with long-term care home operators and people who represent workers in these places, and they haven't been given any information about when and how they are to roll out these vaccines. Steven keeps talking, and rightly so, about the issue of supply and manufacturing, but another big issue is, are we in Canada going to be ready to roll these vaccines out on the ground as quick as possible? Because particularly in settings like long-term care, time is lives. Dozens of people are dying in these settings every day, and the sooner we can get a safe and effective vaccine to them, the better.
Steven, is this something that concerns you as well, the rollout?
It does, I think, in particular for the Pfizer vaccine, which does require super cold freezing. So that vaccine has to be kept at negative 80 degrees Celsius in order for it to remain effective. Now, maintaining that kind of super cold chain is not easy. That is a lot colder than most vaccines need to be kept. And so there just aren't so many freezers in Canada that can keep a vaccine at negative 80 degrees Celsius. We're really talking about dry ice. And so as a result, those kind of plans that Kelly was talking about that really will be rolled out at the provincial level, because it's the provinces that have responsibility for healthcare in our country, that will need to be robust to make sure that vaccine not only can get to Canadians, but can stay at negative 80 degrees Celsius the entire time.
And Kelly, you talked a little bit about it, but what would the rollout look like?
So the Pfizer vaccine, which I'll talk about first, because it does appear to be the one that's likeliest to get approval first. What they're planning to do is, the vaccine's being made in both Belgium and in Michigan, and then they're doing a sort of just-in-time delivery. So there are going to be 14 different distribution points across the country. We just learned about this at a briefing yesterday, where Pfizer can deliver the vaccine in a just-in-time fashion to these, sort of very large ultra-cold freezers. And then it will be up to the provinces, in cooperation with the military, to actually get these vaccines out and into people's arms. And as I said, I think the first phase, there's general agreement that it does look like it is going to begin in long-term care and possibly in hospitals as well. So, these vaccines, the ultra-cold ones that Pfizer makes, can be kept in a sort of like travel pack with dry ice, and can be kept a few days in that fashion outside of these ultra-cold freezers. So when it comes to long-term care, I think the thinking is that, essentially they'll drive up with these boxes of dry ice vaccines and just, inoculate as many people as they possibly can.
And Steven, this is something that we've been hearing about, who is going to get it first. How can the distribution of a COVID-19 vaccine be done in a safe and equitable way? Who should get it first?
Well, within a country, I think it's clear that those who are most vulnerable to severe COVID-19, as well as those who we depend upon to mount the healthcare response, need to be first. So as Kelly mentioned, that means the residents of long-term care facilities, mostly seniors, but also healthcare providers who are working in hospitals and clinics across the country. I think, though, it raises a question about when you think beyond the individual country, that we are seeing right now a very unfair system where certain countries will get this vaccine, Canada included. Other countries aren't even starting to be able to think about vaccine deployment because they haven't even been able to purchase any, whether available or not. And so in that respect, when we think of equitable and fairness, yes, we have to think who gets it first within Canada, but we also should be thinking about who should be getting it first around the world, because there's lots of vulnerable people and healthcare providers in poorer countries who are not going to get it in 2020 and not in 2021 either.
When we do also talk about Canada, we have a lot of remote communities, and Kelly, with how Canada has treated Indigenous communities right now, we can't even get clean drinking water to those communities. So how can we get a vaccine to in an equitable way in this situation?
So yeah, I would say that's a very large concern. There's been lots of talk and thinking about how to ensure that particularly remote communities, remote First Nation communities, do have access to this vaccine. I should say the National Advisory Committee on Immunization, which is sort of setting out the initial priorities for who should get the vaccine first, has included those remote Indigenous communities on its list of people who should get it. So my hope certainly is that everybody who's thinking about the logistics of delivering this vaccine is thinking long and hard about how to make sure these communities can be vaccinated effectively and quickly.
We still see a percentage of people who don't believe the virus is real, and there's a percentage of people who are vaccine hesitant. What percentage of Canadians need to get the vaccine in order for us to reach herd immunity, Kelly?
So there's quite a bit of debate and discussion about that. There has been talk of something around the 70% mark. I mean, I think the truth is we don't really know, because we don't actually know whether these vaccines stop transmission. Just the way these trials were done, we know that they were very efficacious in terms of stopping disease, and that is very important. But we don't know as much about the question of transmission. So I think, that 70% estimate that's been floating around is a number to consider, but it's not a guarantee. I mean, I tend to think that by far the most important thing here is the difference that is going to be made when those people who are likeliest to fall severely ill and die from COVID have the protection these vaccines offer.
Canada has been at the forefront in the past and has contributed to historical vaccines. And a lot of a question that people have been asking is, why are we not producing this vaccine? Steven?
Well, so currently we don't have the manufacturing capacity to produce the two leading candidates for the vaccine. So that's it's the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine. And so it's not really an option at this point. So vaccine production is something that requires a lot of advanced preparation to do. It's only efficient if it's done in very, very large quantities. So as a result, the global pharmaceutical industry has centralized its vaccine production facilities. And mostly, in terms of the latest platforms, such as the mRNA vaccine platforms, that has just not happened in Canada. Now, there's lots of reasons that point to that. I mean, so Canada isn't the largest country in the world by population. So some of the pharmaceutical companies would be choosing locations based on population, but also it depends on things like tax incentives, government support for these types of things. But this isn't something that could have happened sort of in the last couple of years. In order to create a new vaccine manufacturing plant, we're probably talking about at least a decade type of foresight and investments, and that hasn't happened.
I know it doesn't help anything to look to place blame, but moving forward, Kelly, is this a sector that we should be contributing more to?
Well, it's an interesting debate. I think everybody would like it if we had more of the ability to produce our own vaccines. And, the government has said that it intends to expand its vaccine manufacturing capacity at a National Research Council facility that's in Montreal. It made earlier promises to have that facility up and running to produce more traditional types of vaccines, and it hasn't met that deadline. It has not met that promise. But the larger question of, how do we attract investment in things like vaccine production capacity? I mean, those are big, long-term kinds of questions, and they're ones we should think about in the future. But frankly, they're not going to have a huge impact on whether we get vaccines first or early. We are going to ship these vaccines in from other places, as is almost every other country in the world. I mean, everyone is talking about the fact that the UK has approved the Pfizer vaccine and is going to be getting doses, soon. I mean, I think it should be pointed out that, Pfizer is not a UK company, and Pfizer is not producing its vaccine there, and they are going to wind up getting the vaccine either first or close to first.
Well, the opposition leader, Erin O'Toole, has criticized the government of only pre-ordering vaccines from companies like Pfizer and Moderna because our collaboration with Chinese vaccine maker CanSino collapsed. Steven, is he right when he says that the government shouldn't have, and I quote, have put all our eggs in the basket of China?
Well, I mean, we know that Canada has put its eggs in every basket, in a sense. I mean, Canada has put a bet on every vaccine except for the Russian vaccine, which is being developed in a different way with less transparency around the trials. So in that respect, we know that based on the orders that have been put in place. I think, though, when you look at the CanSino agreements, at the time it made a lot of good sense. I mean, CanSino is a company. It was founded by a Canadian-Chinese citizen. It's built on the idea of leveraging scientific collaboration between Canadian researchers and Chinese researchers. Very important area. And so in that respect, I think it was one of many bets that the government placed. It didn't end up working out because the Chinese government stepped in and actually stopped the transport of vaccine candidate to Canada, where it was supposed to go through a clinical trial. But, when you're in a pandemic and the costs and the health effects are so high, it makes sense to put a bet on everything. And that's what the federal government has done.
We've run out of time, unfortunately, but thank you so much for both of your insights. We've all learned a lot. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.